everybody, I'm Joe,
And I'm JoJo, and this is Canonical Nonsense.
and we are just two average Joes reading books.
As you know by now, we are taking a look at the dragon canon and the portrayal of dragons in modern fantasy.
Today we are discussing Seraphina by Rachel Hartman. Some background on Seraphina. This book is the first in a duology and was Rachel Hartman's debut novel. It is a young adult book following a girl who is secretly a half dragon hybrid in a world where dragons can transform into humans. Rachel Hartman also has another duology titled Tess of the Road, in which she follows Seraphina's half sister on a different journey. So, if you're interested in Seraphina, if you've read this first duology and you haven't read Tess of the Road, it might be something that you want to pick up.
Maybe.
Yeah, we haven't read it, so we can't speak to it. We can only speak to Seraphina. We can't speak to the second novel in this series either. Hartman says that her author influences include Terry Pratchett and Anne McCaffrey, two authors that we have previously read on this podcast. So if you are interested in hearing more about Terry Pratchett and Anne McCaffrey and you haven't listened to those episodes yet, we encourage you to. A reminder to the listeners, this podcast does contain spoilers. So if you want to read Seraphina and don't want to be spoiled, please go and read the book and come back to us. Before you leave, however, we want to go over the trigger warning we have for this book, and that trigger warning is self-harm. We will tell you once we get to that scene that we are about to talk about the scene, but there is a scene of self-harm. Okay? Anything you'd like to add?
Xenophobia and basic fighting, if that's a trigger warning.
Yeah, someone gets their head cut off. There's also a lot of xenophobia and prejudice against the dragon species.
You want to just want to talk about the book?
Wait, didn't we have another thing that we wanted to say before we... Oh, would you recommend... Do you want to talk about whether or not we recommend the book before we jump in?
Oh, yeah. We should talk about whether or not we want to recommend this book because I really had a super visceral negative reaction to the first 3 chapters, even though I thought the writing was pretty good, and I spent the whole book trying to figure out if this book was good or not. So that definitely colors a lot of my review, and it was definitely something that I was thinking about actively while reading this book. And I did come to the conclusion that it is a good book and I would recommend it, especially if you or someone you know is a sad bookish 12 to 16-year-old girl. That's who this book is for.
Yeah.
If you see someone who's a young girl with glasses who maybe looks out a window at a fall day, give her this book.
Yeah, I think I had an easier time with this book than JoJo did. And I think it was partially because I was definitely, when I was 12 to 16, the audience that this book was written for. So I was kind of like, oh, yes, I probably would have enjoyed this book more if I was in that demographic. But I, like, nostalgia can really commiserate with that time in my life and really wanting books like this. And I would have been very happy to read this book. Though part of me thinks I might have read this book. There were parts of it that sprung, memories, but I cannot remember actually reading this book or any of the plot when I was in the act of reading. It was just moments and names and then specific scenes where I was like, I feel like I've read this before. I would recommend this book as well. I think if you are a more sensitive person, if you have a young person in your life who really likes reading fantasy books and is looking for one that is not very focused on romance, because I think a lot of young adult books are very focused on romance now, this is a good one.
Still focuses on romance. I mean, the two
There's some
leads.
romance, but it's not the focus.
There's a half a dozen different times where the female lead and the male lead quote books at each other, you know?
It's a bookish love.
Yep.
It's not a sexual love. There's no sexual awakening, I think, in the character, which is nice.
Yeah. Anyway, we both think it's a good book.
Yeah, I would recommend it, yeah.
Just know that I'm squinting my eyes as I'm saying I would recommend this, you know?
I would recommend it to a younger audience. It was written for a younger audience, and it is for a younger audience. I think differently than Guards. I think a younger audience would enjoy, but all age groups would really enjoy it. This is definitely probably going to be most enjoyed by that young adult age group, which is fine. That's who it was written for. So, do you want to jump into the plot?
Take us away.
So this is the first book that we read that is actually in the first person. which is exciting in some ways. First person is not my favorite perspective. I like third person best. You have
I'm
thoughts
a
on this as well, yeah?
Oh, I'm just a big fan of second person. I love the sense of alienation that it gives you by describing a character that is you.
Do you have a recommendation for a good second person
I
book?
mean, if you want to read an incredibly difficult, silly book, If on a Winter's Night a Traveler by Italo Calvino is very fun because half of the book is you trying to read Italo Calvino's If on a Winter's Night a Traveler, and then like every other chapter is like a different chapter of a very different book. And like at one point, you kind of just give up on trying to read If on a Winter's Night a Traveler and you start trying to flirt with this girl. It's great. It's a weird description of a book.
So probably a very, very different book from
Yeah, it's probably
Seraphina.
going to be the of all the books that we throw out that we think you should read, this is probably the most skippable.
On a Winter's Night a Traveler.
If on a Winter's Night a Traveler.
All right, so you may skip that book. It's not required reading for enjoyment of this podcast. But if you want to read a really interesting, hard to read book, it's there for you. All right, the book starts with our main character, Seraphina, saying that she remembers her birth. And immediately we have another dead mother. Her mother dies giving birth.
Quickest dead mom so far, everybody. We did it. Like within two chapters, or not two chapters, within two paragraphs, straight dead.
It's like the first thing that we learn.
It's not even in chapter one, it's in the prequel.
It's, yeah. So, of all the books we've read, and we've read, this is our eighth or ninth.
This would be nine.
Okay, of the nine books we've read, in only one has the main character had two living parents who survived to the end of the book. Only one out of nine. So, we're not doing great in terms of living parents, but here we go. So she remembers her birth like Dwight from The Office, which is kind of weird. Did you have anything you wanted to say about that?
Oh, the scene sucked and I hated it, and I don't know why it's in the book.
It was super weird. Yeah, didn't you
It
just
makes her sound like a like Wednesday Adams that like just
yeah.
like when she was born everybody hated her and then they took her to a priest and then the priest was like this baby has an ill omen over her and
Yeah.
then it was like no one will ever care for me and it was like what
Yeah.
and they like further explain like what's going on in this scene two chapters later which
Yeah.
I don't understand why they didn't just put in this scene because this scene is so weird. And then they're like, hey, you know how weird that was? Like, it actually kind of makes sense once we give you this information. And it was like, why wasn't this in the prequel?
Yeah, we have a classic example of the author should have like cut out the prologue and then put it in as a flashback later in the book instead of putting it at the beginning. This happens a lot in books, and this is one of those examples. So, in this prologue, she is baptized, as Jojo said, and the way that their religion works is it's like a very saint heavy religion. They don't actually, in my memory, they don't actually ever mention a single god figure. They don't when they swear, they're not like, oh God, they say like Saint Vit Spit and things like that. They're evoking the saints instead. It seems like they pray to the saints as well. So it's an interesting religion. I wish that we kind of learned more about the saints, but maybe that's in book two. When she is baptized, they drop a book to pick which is her patron saint, and the book falls open to a saint that was deemed a heretic. So they're like, oh no, and she's given a different saint as her patron instead. But this is where the priest is like, "Ooh, she's a freak," and walks away. And then Seraphina's father looks at her and is like, "Oh, she's just a little baby, but she can understand us." Yeah, and it was kind of unnecessary. I thought more was going to come of the heretic saint, but nothing ever actually happened. So,
I mean, so we
um,
do find out, we read the description of the test book. What is it called?
Tess of the Road, which sounds like totally dystopian. It doesn't sound fantasy. It sounds sci-fi.
Yeah, well, the road, yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's just because of the book,
I
The
think
Road.
it's the road. The word "the road" has a specific connotation in English literature. Test on the Road, like the biopsy that you would read to start the book, spoils the
Yeah,
entire
it does.
second book in Seraphina. So like we know what the saints are now, which I guess also like we're pro spoilers, so we're like, oh, okay, they just don't do it in this one. That's why they set all this saint stuff up.
But we probably shouldn't say it.
Yeah, yeah. What all you got to do is Google it, spoil the whole thing. That's a thing you
Yeah,
want.
go to fantasticfiction.com and look at her. Look at her writer bio, the short synopsis of each book, and you'll know.
Yeah, but they talk a lot about saints in this book and it doesn't come up.
Though the saints are interesting. I always love like the stories about saints for the Middle Ages, and apparently Hartman did too, because that was a huge inspiration for her doing these like all these things with saints.
I was just gonna there's a couple of things that they're like kind of heavy-handed about that don't actually come up, and this is one of them, which is why we're
Yeah, yeah.
talking about it.
We have a time skip, thankfully. We don't watch her grow up slowly until she gets to the interesting part of her life. We skip to when she is 16, and we skip to a scene that is the prince's funeral. So we learn that the prince was attacked and beheaded during a hunting party. Beheading is the traditional dragon execution strategy. So there's a lot of kind of fear and anger and distrust within the city that's already distrustful of the dragons because they think that, well, maybe he was killed by a dragon. This country has been observing a very tentative, very fragile peace with dragons for the last 40 years.
And like neither party is anywhere closer to liking each other than when they first stopped killing each other.
Yeah, a big theme in this book is prejudice and xenophobia, and we will talk about it throughout. But it does feel like this was a piece that was just made and not a piece that has been around for 40 years. And then the complexities that surround what peace looks like 40 years later, and where where potentially some things have gone sour and gone bad, and where hatred has like festered, and then in other areas where things have gotten better. It seems like it just has been stagnant for 40 years.
Yeah, it's very strange.
But this is where I do want to read the passage that describes the prince, because something that this book really did well, Rachel Hartman knows how to construct a sentence. Like her writing is quite beautiful. Here's the description of chapter 1 and the prince's death. At the center of the cathedral stood a model of heaven called the Golden House. Its roof unfolded like a flower to reveal a human-sized hollow, in which the body of poor Prince Rufus lay shrouded in gold and white. His feet rested upon the house's blessed threshold. His head lay cradled by a nest of gilded stars. At least, it should have been. Prince Rufus's killer had decapitated him. Great way to start a book. Too bad we didn't start the book that way. So, during the funeral, Seraphina is asked to play the flute at the funeral. She 2 weeks prior she gained employment. I don't know if that's the right way to say
She
that.
got hired, yeah.
She got a job as the like assistant to the court musician.
Yeah, like 2 weeks ago. So the first like 2 chapters is all about showing how Seraphina is so awesome at everything and she hates it because she's supposed to be a small and hide at home because her dad is a big meanie, maybe it's unclear. And like she has a dark secret which you don't know about yet. And you're just
Yeah,
like,
we don't know yet that she's a dragon hybrid for sure and certain. I feel like the book is like trying to kind of couch that.
which I don't think we've mentioned about. She's a half dragon, half hybrid. That's like a big thing, but they don't talk about it yet. But like the first beginning of the book is just like creating a series of events why someone who should not be on stage is like on stage. So like she gets hired by this court musician who like shouldn't hire her at all, but she's actually the best out of like 20 different people. She gets a surprise hire for this thing, and then she like puts together this entire like funeral service like performance.
Yeah, like last minute. Well, obviously because it's a funeral.
And then like, oh no, 2 different people, like one got sick and one lost their.
He like sat on his flute and broke the reed, and he didn't have an extra one. But no one could just give him their reed. Like,
Yeah, she just uses her own. They're like, "Oh no, he broke it, so I have to perform it." It's a very convoluted thing.
so this is like another issue that both Jojo and I have with this book, which is like so much of it relies on pure coincidence. So much of the action and like the plot where Seraphina just like happens to be in the right place at the right time, or this odd series of disconnected events happen that forces her to do a thing that she doesn't want to do. So she's playing the flute at this funeral, and she's amazing, and everyone's crying because it's such a so beautiful. So we hear kind of this kind of lovely description of her flute playing, and then as the funeral ends, she leaves the church and runs into Orma. And we learn that Orma is a dragon in human form. So in this book, this is our first dragon shifter book. Dragons can take human form, but they have certain specific things. Like they cannot grow beards. They feel and look kind of alien when they first take human form because they have to learn human, mannerisms, human ways of like talking and moving. And they also are required to wear bells on their person to designate them as a dragon. But Orma, because he is a scholar, does not actually have to wear a bell. So most people don't know that he is a dragon. Seraphina is aware. As she's talking to Orma, a girl, like a little street urchin, comes up to him and hands him a coin, which he pockets, and she's like, "What's that?" And he doesn't respond. Seraphina says then that she has a headache, and as she attempts to walk home, another dragon who is in human form is attacked in the street by the sons of Saint Ogdo. And Saint Ogdo is another saint who I believe slayed a dragon during his life.
Yeah, he's like the dragon slayer saint.
Yeah, so it's this extremist group that really hates dragons. So he's attacked. Orma is able to signal the dragon guard with an earring that all dragons wear. So dragons have these mechanical contraptions. They're never fully explained how they work, but they're basically like microphones that they can send distress signals, they can speak to each other over distances with, and he is able to contact the dragon guard. Before the dragon guard arrives, the king guard arrives, led by the bastard prince, whose name is Lucian. And we immediately know that he is going to be the love interest of Seraphina. Then the dragon guard arrives and reveals that this was a test to see how prepared the king's guard was, because the leader of the dragons is set to arrive in a few weeks' time for the anniversary celebration of the dragon human treaty. Do you have anything you want to add here?
The whole scene felt really weird with the way that out of nowhere these people pop out fully armed in front of like the most famous. It's like everyone is at this like fancy funeral and now
Yeah.
it's like they're like we're going to stage a hate crime right outside of it. But it's just I don't know, it's weird. I
It's
mean,
like kind of rude, actually.
yeah, it's just
Like
it's
their prince just died and they're like, we're going to test them.
yeah. The scene isn't also very well described. It's a little confusing.
It is a little confusing. Seraphina, while she's helping the dragon, gets some dragon blood on her coat. Dragon blood is silver. And then we have a flashback.
I do have to want to say something here, which is like,
Oh, okay.
I think that Rachel Hartman is quite a talented writer. And one of the things that she can do quite well is to know like where to start a story and like how to build momentum. And I think she does that not at all in the prologue, but does it very well in the first scene. And then
Yeah.
it's so funny, be like, all right, this person knows like how to maintain momentum, and then absolutely slams her foot on the brakes to go back and give us 3 flashbacks in a
Oh my
row.
God. Yeah, these flashbacks were tough to get through. I was really worried about the rest of the book when I was reading these. But then
Uh-huh.
after we get through them, like it's okay. But yikes, yeah, these were like, ugh.
Yeah, the momentum comes back and the flashbacks give you enough information. Before Seraphine is like, everyone hates me and I don't understand it. And then you like get to these flashbacks and you're like, oh, these are the stakes of this book. And then the whole book makes more sense and works better. But it's like, it's just this weird out of order front part that really confused me.
Totally agree. So during these flashback scenes, we learn a little bit about dragons and their relationship to emotions. So when they are in their dragon form, they do not feel emotions. They have this really inhuman detachment from any kind of feeling whatsoever, and they really value logic. So think like Vulcans a little bit,
Yeah.
if you want a comparison to a different book. They have this philosophy called the Ard, which I have. Here's the quote. Dragons found the human condition confusing and often overwhelming, and they developed strategies over the years to keep their heads in Ard. So that's what they call their philosophy. It's the Ard, while they took human form. Ard was a central concept of Draconic philosophy. The word itself meant roughly order or correctness. Ard was the only way the world should be, the imposition of order upon chaos, and ethical and physical rightness. Human emotions, messy and unpredictable, were antithetical to Ard. Dragons use meditation and what Orma called cognitive architecture to partition their minds into discrete spaces. So, emotions, which a Sar, and Sar is a term for dragons, which the Tsar found uncomfortable and overpowering, were locked away securely and never permitted to leak out. So they really undervalue emotion and, in fact, find emotion really dangerous to the point where there is this group of dragons that will kind of test dragons who are in human form to see if they are truly in ard. And if they deem that their emotions are getting the best of them, they will force them to report and have those memories and emotions physically excised from their brains.
Yeah, the dragons have thought police.
Yeah, they have thought
They're
police.
still the good guys, sort of.
Yeah, it's kind of confusing.
There's a lot of times in this book where, especially in like, so we're still in the flashbacks and we get a scene of like one of these censors who are like thought police in action, where we learn that Orma was like maybe too attached to Seraphina and to like test him. There's a dragon teacher that like kind of kidnaps Seraphina.
Just go over this scene.
Yeah, kidnaps Seraphina and like dangles her over a ledge.
And she's like 2 years old. Like she's a kid, or four maybe.
Yeah, and Ormesta basically like lie to this censor and talk her down and say like, you don't want to kill Seraphina, not because I don't want you to kill Seraphina, but because it'd be like bad for your career.
Yeah. He is successful.
Seraphina's like, at this point, I thought I didn't learn to hate dragons. I learned that like it's so weird because she's like, I didn't hate dragons, I just got a fear of heights. And I was like, I would kind of hate dragons if I was in your situation. Like
Yeah.
they're pretty rude to her the whole book, and she's fine with them.
Yeah, especially at that point she didn't know Orma was a dragon. So she just thought that like but she knew this other woman was a dragon.
Yeah, it's a weird scene.
So
Then we get context for that scene immediately after it too, which is funny. You want to talk about this?
yeah, the other thing I just wanted to mention before we move to the second scene is that her whole life she's like, Orma doesn't care about me because he didn't try to save me from falling off this tower. He was just trying to protect this other person's career. And I'm like, girl, like, he, you are so smart. Like, you have to know that he did this because he knew it was the only way he could get around the dragon censors and also save you and protect you.
Weird tension in her arc where she has to like figure out whether or not Orma likes her or not. But
Yeah.
you're reading the book and you're like, nah, he likes you. I don't know. I
He
don't know.
likes you.
Yeah, it's like it's so obvious.
Her blind spots, and not just this, but in other things, are wild.
Yeah.
Just like absolutely wild.
Yeah, she's 15.
Yeah, yeah. Well, 60, but yeah.
Mm.
We have another flashback after this that shows us the first time she saw Orma in his dragon form. She sees him in his dragon form. She runs away from home during this dragon procession. So there is a law that disallows dragons from using their dragon form inside, I think, like the entire territory.
Kingdom. Yeah, like you cannot be in dragon form. You can't fly into it. There's the boundaries, and then you have to like be a person if you want to like cross the border, it seems.
Yeah, except for this one procession. I just want to say the description of the dragons. So, the description of the dragons when they're in dragon form, and we almost never see them in dragon form. A horned monster was rounding the block of shops, his arched back as high as the second story windows. His wings demurely folded so as not to topple nearby chimney pot. His elegant neck curved downward like a submissive dog's, a posture intended to look non-threatening. Under the white winter sky, the dragons looked rusty, a disappointing color for so fabled a species. But soon I realized that their shades were subtle. The right slant of sunlight brought out iridescent sheen to their scales. They shimmered with rich underhues from purple to gold. So that's what they look like in dragon form. So she sees Orma in his dragon form for the first time, just as this crowd of humans is starting to really get scared of the dragons because they're kind of accidentally knocking things over. They're just too big for the street. And a kind of, not a riot, but a kind of a stampede breaks out. Orma is able to protect Seraphina from getting crushed by standing over her, so the crowd is partying around him. At the sight of this dragon form, she has a memory of her mother's. So dragons in this book series have the ability to pass maternal memories from parent to child. Her mother leaves her what's called all these mind pearls that is triggered. The different mind pearls are triggered by her experiencing different things. So this one was set to trigger the first time she saw Orma as a dragon. In this memory, she sees her mother, or she is like experiencing it as her mother, and her mother is talking to Orma who she realizes is her uncle at this point. So she didn't actually know that Orma was her uncle until she was like 10 years old. After she has this mind pearl, she gets really sick, and it's triggered by this first draconic memory. And scales start to appear on her left wrist and around her waist, all the way around her waist like a girdle. She also sees visions of other people who we, the reader, obviously understand as other dragon hybrids. Like they have tails, they hang from trees. One of them has tiny wings on her back. But Seraphina doesn't actually acknowledge or even think that this could be a possibility. She just calls them her grotesque.
Dear reader, I also didn't figure this out. So,
Oh, I
not
was like immediately, I was like, oh, cool, she's seeing these dragon hybrids. And I was like, why isn't she talking about the fact that they're other dragon hybrids? And then I realized later in the book, I was like, oh, she didn't know this?
I gotta be honest, this book got a couple past me. Uh,
Okay, well, maybe I'm so jaded.
no, 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 no. It was probably that. Like if you figure stuff out, sometimes you're smart and that's great, and then the writing pays off and it's a good thing. And sometimes you're just like, okay, sure, why not? That sounds fine.
Okay. Well, as she recovers from her illness, her father admits to her that he was unaware that her mother was a dragon until after she had died giving birth. He then gives her education over to Orma, who teaches her music and also how to control her visions. So her visions kind of come upon her, and she'll like be pulled into watching one of these, she calls them grotesque, one of these other dragon hybrids, and she can't control when that happens, and she basically passes out. And the way it's described outwardly is it seems like it looks like she's having a seizure when she's experiencing one of these visions. And Orma is able to kind of get her to control them by teaching her how to meditate. She creates this garden in her brain that she like places them all in.
It's like a physical space that she travels through.
Yeah, and I usually actually really, really hate those kind of mental scenes where it's like you have to make the barrier in your mind to protect yourself and blah blah blah. Or like those montage scenes where they're learning how to do like mental stuff because I find them really boring. But I think this book did it really, really well. And the way that they did it well was just the richness of Rachel Hartman's writing when she describes like the way the garden functions is so dreamy that it when it functions completely on dream logic, like she asks one of the grotesques to make a bridge so she can pass over this river, and he pulls 3 fish out of his bag and then a nightdress and makes a bridge with that. So it's like dream logic. And then this other grotesque is shooting aphids off of off of plants in her garden with like this really, really tiny crossbow. It really reminded me of Herodotus Bosch's Garden of Earthly Delights in many ways.
Yeah,
And it really worked. Like I loved all the descriptions of her garden.
a little bit softer than that one, but yeah, yeah,
Oh yeah, it's not like a vision of hell,
yeah.
but like the saturation of the color and then like the kind of she is very Seraphina has a lot of internalized self-hatred towards her dragonness, so her scales.
They explain like in this chapter, and I think it's very very important and really should have happened earlier, that basically if at any point anyone,
Yeah.
human, dragon, you name it, found out that she was a half breed, they would essentially beat her to death with sticks and then like chop up her body and then like set parts of it on fire. Like there's this whole religion that we sort of talk about in it where
Dragon or human, by the way.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like no one is like, yeah, she's cool.
Like the religion that everybody believes and is like fully bought into has literal biblical law that's like, yeah, kill her on sight.
Yeah, and her father doesn't even know. He's like, I didn't know she was a dragon, but might have broken a law, and I might also be either jailed or executed for this action of producing a child with a dragon.
Yeah, you're like, why does Seraphina's dad suck so much? And it's like, oh, the love of his life died in childbirth, and he found out that he created a moral, like a religious and criminal sin by having this kid, and he doesn't have anyone to talk about it.
You're tapping the table.
Oh, sorry, I am. Sorry, listeners.
Yeah, no, I you're right. And he is also her father is also the foremost lawyer on the dragon human treaty. Like he is the person who knows the most about the dragon human treaty of any living person or dragon, and he can't even figure out the legality of what he did.
I think it's implied that he becomes that dude because he's like, I gotta figure out if I'm going to prison for this.
Yeah.
It like makes all of the scenes come before it make so much more sense,
Yeah.
and they just waited like
And this is like the 5th chapter of the book or something. Like, put that in the prologue. Put that in the prologue.
it's not a reveal. It's just like the whole stakes of the book get revealed 100 pages in or something, and it's like that really should have been earlier.
So after all of those flashbacks, we return to the present time where Seraphina is returning to her room in an attempt to control her headache. We learn that the headaches are caused and connected to her vision and her connection to the other grotesques. So the way that she manages them is she goes into her mental garden and she tends to them, which is like interesting. And she has to do this every night or she risks having visions when she's in public.
It's a cool scene.
It is a cool scene. I really like that scene.
And we're back in present tense and we're ready to go.
The next day, she wakes up and she tends to her scales before the day begins. We learn that she has to really take a lot of time for her scales. She has to wash them, oil them. She's at risk of them getting scale mites and other things. So that it was just like an interesting look into how she has to, like, how her life is a little bit different. She then is late to her choir practice, and this is where we meet Viridis, who is the court composer. He's a great character. I liked him a lot.
He's just a fussy old man who's like kind of right. He's got gout.
He's got the gout, so he has a gout couch, and his like hands are like bandaged, but he like refuses to like change his diet, which is, I mean, every person I know who has gout also kind of refuses to change their diet, so it's real. He is really grumpy and like kind of bombastic in some ways, and like people are like, "Oh, he sucks," but he sucks in like he just like really speaks his mind and isn't afraid to ruffle feathers, but he really does care about the people who he is in charge of as well. So he's a really lovely character.
It does suck so much that people retroactively like Seraphina more. They're like,
Yeah.
thank you for being the one holding the umbrella in the middle of this shitstorm, making sure we all stay dry.
Yeah, her like musicians compose a song about it for her at some point in the book because they're like, he's so difficult to work with, which he is. Like, he makes everyone's life harder, even though he cares. We all know that person. He reminds her that she is behind on her tasks, and he also tells her that she absolutely must go to what's called the Blue Salon the next day because the princess Gliselda has invited her, and it's rude for her to reject her invitation. So the Blue Salon is a salon that Princess Gliselda, who's another character we will be introduced to in the next scene, kind of runs. It's just a social gathering of her court. But he wants her to meet this man named Lars, who is his protege, who she hasn't met yet. So Seraphina then goes to give Princess Gliselda her music lesson. The princess is like not very good at playing, I think, is it a harpsichord?
It's a harpsichord. This is another instance where Seraphina is the most perfect, best person at music and stuff because the princess was going to give up on music and then Seraphina showed up and now she's like kind of good at it and she's just like, but Seraphina's like, oh no, I'm so modest, I can't. It's a little annoying, but you know.
Yeah, but I can also imagine that Viridis's personality and Gliselda's personality would cause a lot of conflict, and where Seraphina and Gliselda don't have that conflict.
Yeah, I mean, this is just like another instance where you're like, ah, this is a book for 16-year-old girls to feel good about themselves.
Yeah.
Anyway, keep going.
The the princess states that she thinks humans are superior to dragons, and Seraphina, little social justice warrior that she is, immediately scolds her. Remember, she has been in this position for 2 weeks, so she does not know this princess very well. And like she is also not of noble birth. So she feels confident and comfortable being like, absolutely not, you're wrong, princess, which is interesting. But like, Seraphina stands up for her values.
Also, she spent the first 3 chapters being like, "My dad says I can't let anyone know I exist because if they, like, pay any attention to me, they'll find my deep, dark secret, and
Yeah.
then they'll murder me with sticks."
And cut me apart and
Yeah,
bury
yeah,
me in
yeah,
different
yeah.
places. Yeah, but she's like basically scolds her and she's like, "No, that's wrong. Our survival hinges on being interesting to the dragons." Gliselda's lady in waiting, whose name is Millie, is also there, and Seraphina like uses this really weird analogy. She compares humans to cockroaches, and both the girls are like, "Ew, cockroaches!" It's like very silly. It's like, girl, you should have, maybe you could have done a little better there. But they do eventually come around to her side because this is a young adult novel, and they're very open to listening to her perspective on why humans aren't superior to dragons, and we shouldn't think that way.
Is like perfect because she's a high femme character, and Seraphina is like not a high femme character, but both versions of their femininity are allowed to exist and prosper, and I think it's really great.
Yeah, it's great. Griselda's a great character. She's so funny. Yeah, so this is like maybe the is this the first book where we have two versions of femininity that aren't like at war with each other, or the author isn't like openly being like, this is the correct version of femininity and this is the incorrect version?
Tamaran, there's only a couple chicks, and they're all pretty.
They're like two women. Yeah, they're the same.
Guards Guard, everyone was like kind of stupid.
We only had one woman.
Okay, yeah, this may be our first book where you can
Mhm.
have two different depictions of a female protagonist that are like good at different things, but are both like Seraphina is the quiet nerd who helps
Mhm.
out the like cheerleader and Princess Griselda, but it doesn't say that one of them are better than the other, which is quite nice.
And Griselda and Seraphina both have very different strengths, which is really great. And they both are not immune to making mistakes.
Hmm.
But their mistakes aren't tied to an inherent goodness or badness. It's just tied to flaws in their character because all characters should have some flaws.
Especially these 16-year-old girls.
Yeah. Later, Seraphina contacts Orma through her personal harpsichord. So, this is another instance where there's that dragon technology. And they agree to discuss what she saw in her garden. When she was in her garden the night before, there was a few of her grotesques were out of place. She then makes her way to him, but on her way there, she runs into what's called a quiggeltal. The book calls them quigs after this. So, quigs are a different species of dragon. They cannot transform, so they only have one shape, and it's kind of this. It already is this kind of like half humanoid, half dragon shape. They have six limbs, they have four arms. They kind of are described in a way that sounds kind of chameleon in their facial structure, where they have two conical eyes that can point in different directions, and they have a really large mouth. They have a really long tongue that they stick out, and they live in garbage heaps. And they, before they moved into the city, they lived in like the cracks and crevices of the dragon caves.
They rule.
They're cool, and they're really odd and really wonderful. Oh, they have really stinky breath is what I was gonna say.
I was going to say, yeah, a lot of this book is about if humanity is good or like is being more animalistic or not emotionally good, and it's really interesting to have this different type of person in play, even though they don't really do much.
Yeah, we also learned that Quiggeltals are the creatures who make all of the dragon's technological items. The dragons themselves don't make any of them.
Yeah, the technology in this book is weird because the book has whatever technology the plot needs, but
Yeah.
also it's maybe a medieval society. It is unclear.
Yeah.
So they have like talking and listening devices, not plumbing? I don't know.
Well, they probably have plumbing because they've had plumbing existed since the ancient era.
I don't know if
But
they have a printing press. Let's put it that, you know?
yeah, that's unclear. We never to learn about that. So it's established in this book that dragons have a really all kinds of dragons, including the quigs, have a very highly developed sense of smell. And the quig smells her and tells her like that he can smell how sharp her blade is in her pocket. Basically, that's how good his smell is. But he also says that he can smell dragon on her. And at first, she's like, "Oh, he can smell that I'm part dragon." And then she realizes she still has the blood on her cloak from that dragon encounter at the beginning of the book. And she smells it and like starts to fall into a vision. But before she does, he's like asking her for money, and she says to him, "I only trade metal for metal." And the Quig pulls out what he has made, one of which is a figurine of a lizard with a human head, and she trades him for that lizard. And then she falls into a vision. And in this vision, she sees one of her grotesques, who she has named Fruit Bat. All of her grotesques have these like very 16-year-old names that she's given. Like one of them's name is Loud Lad, one of them is Miss Fusspots, and then we have Fruit Bat. And he looks up at her and she thinks that maybe he is able to recognize that she is there in the vision with him. For the most part, within her visions, she cannot interact with the people. It seems that they are unaware of her watching them, except for this one person who really isn't, we don't need to get into that. But he seems like he's finally acknowledging her existence. She wakes to see two men and a woman tending to her. They agree to take her back to the castle, and as they go, they discuss a plan to poison the Quig because they eat garbage. Which Seraphina is like, that's not going to work because they can like smell how sharp my knife is. They're going to be able to smell poison in garbage. But when they arrive, one of the men actually threatens her and tells her that he saw that idol in her coin purse and that she must repent because he kind of accuses her of sleeping with dragons. I mean, he does accuse her of sleeping with dragons. And at first she's like, "Oh no, like I made a mistake." And then she's like, "Wait, why was he looking through my coin purse?" Which is a good point.
There was like it was a scene where it's like, oh, maybe these xenophobic townspeople aren't that bad, and then it's like, nope, just kidding, they're really bad.
Pretty bad, yeah. She then goes to her garden and sees Fruit Bat. She tells him that he can't pull her into another vision because it isn't safe for her. And then she gets another memory of her mother kissing her father for the first time.
It's like kind of a cute scene, but it gives Seraphina like major ick. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, she's like, "Ah, that's my mom kissing my dad." And it's from her mother's perspective, so she's like, "Ew."
You kind of get the sense that like her mom loved her dad.
Yeah, she really loved him. Her mom was an interesting character, even though we only see her in these flashbacks.
Her mom rules. Just a fun fact if you want to listen to this book, which I actually think it's a pretty good, like, if you're on a car ride with that moody 14-year-old girl I was talking about, this is a good book to put on in the car because the audiobook's pretty good. And the mom scenes have a different voice actor, narrator, and like she's pretty cool.
She calls Orma and tells him about this. She's worried because she's afraid that Fruit Bat will try to like control her mind. And Orma is like, "No, we don't know that." And he suggests that she just try to like reach out to him and like experiment with that.
It's worth saying that there was a person in her brain that she is like locked in a shed that like
Yeah.
tried to take control of her, and the reason we're just like going to reference it real quick is because it does not come up in this book.
Yeah, it must be in the second
It's
book.
got to be the second one.
The next day, she goes to the Blue Salon where she spots Miss Fusspots in person. And she's like, "Oh my God, she's here." But before she can interact with her, the queen arrives. And the queen is the woman who signed the treaty with the dragon. She arrives with a group of dragons in their human form. And she scolds Griselda for not inviting them sooner because she's like, "You really need to do more to mend these relations." Like, and then she just leaves.
It's very funny that her entire dragon human friendship plan is just to force two people that do not like each other to exist in the same space while she is also not there. She did that for that weird march that went very poorly and is doing it again
Yeah.
now. It's like, come on, girl, put some elbow grease into some of these dragon human
And
relationships.
you also have to wonder, like, were those the only 2 attempts that she has made in her life? Like, what else is she doing? Like, what social programs is she enacting? What educational programs?
The religion everybody believes teaches that the dragons have no souls, which is like,
Yeah, they don't believe dragons have souls, and dragons are also like, "We don't have souls."
yeah, it's
But that's, like, a different thing for humans than it is for the dragons culturally.
yeah, anyway, it's weird that there's no attempt to make these people like each other.
Yeah, no education. What well, Seraphina hears some dragon xenophobia from a man named Earl Yosef and attempts to leave, but Veritas tells her, like, "No, no, no, you have to thank the host first." So she goes and suggests to the hosts, which are Griselda and Lucian, that they should dance with the dragons to set an example for the rest of the people because right now the dragons are kind of off in their own little group. They're not interacting with anyone. People are kind of afraid to approach them. And Lucian's like, "Oh, a great idea," and tells like Griselda, like, "Oh, you need to go too." And then Seraphina leaves. But as she leaves, she runs into Lady Karanji, who is Griselda's teacher, and she's this older woman, and she is really incensed. She's like, "Why were you talking to her about dragon politics? Do you think you're so clever?" And blah blah blah. And she's like really really rude to Seraphina. Seraphina tries to explain, but Lady Karanji then says she hopes that Glyselda will finish off the rest of the dragons once she is queen. And Seraphina's like, ooh, that's disturbing. But then she leaves. That night she tends to her garden and she goes to Miss Fusspot. When she touches the hands of the figures within her garden, she is drawn into a vision of what the actual person is doing. So she sees Miss Fusspotts in her bedroom disrobed, and she sees that Miss Fusspotts has a tail. And then Seraphina's like, oh shit, these people are dragon hybrids. And that all of the people in her garden are dragon hybrids.
Which is when Joe felt very smug that she had known the whole time, and I went, "Oh, okay."
Well, actually, I did not feel smug. I was like, oh, wait, she didn't know this? I was honestly confused because I thought that this was already information that the main character knew.
Mm.
Later that night, Fusspotts bangs on her door and like then hits her in the face with a book, which is so great. She just like slaps her in the face with a book and like bruises her nose. It's funny. And she demands to know why she was spying. Seraphina explains that she is also half dragon and that she has visions, and she saw Miss Fusspotts in a vision. Miss Fusspotts, whose name is actually Okra Carmine and she's an ambassador to another country, then says that she has a similar skill, but it works more like intuition. It's almost like this very short future sight where she knows where she has to be when she has to be there, but she doesn't always know why.
Overpowered power in the book. She can like be where she needs to be and just know things intuitively.
Yeah,
And they give it to a character who does not want to do anything, so they can't use it very often.
they
And
use
they're
it
like,
sometimes.
Miss Fusspots, we have to like do something. She's like, "Mm." It's great. Great character.
Yeah, we also get this moment where so Seraphina reveals to her that she has scales on her arm, and her name is like Dame Okra. She is really upset, and she's like, "Oh, that's oh, your life must be so hard having scales in easily concealable places. I have a whole ass tail," and like she talks about how she has to really pad her clothing to hide her tail, so she is actually quite thin, but the way she pads her clothing makes her look like she's quite large, in part to hide that she has this extra. I don't know if it's a limb, if it's a tail. Is it a limb? No, that can't be right.
All right.
You can cut that out.
In the comments, let us know if you think a tail's a limb.
Well, I don't think it. I don't think. I think I'm wrong. Like you
Get in the
don't wouldn't say like
comments.
you wouldn't think a horse has 5 limbs because it has a
Well,
tail,
that
right?
it depends if the tail has muscle in it, right? If it's just
Well,
hair.
okay. Does a spider monkey? Well, a horsetail does have. It has like a little. They have
I
a
think
little
a
tail.
monkey
Their
has a
hair's just
like
long.
their tail is a limb.
Well, so spider monkeys have a prehensile tail. That's not a limb. I'm looking this up. Hold
No, no,
on.
no, no. You just keep moving. So Miss Fuzzpot, yes, it's actually so what's really interesting about the scene is that it's actually a pretty good, scene depicting privilege as we would
Yeah.
understand it in a 2024 context, that how some people who are part of a group that literally if anybody knew they were part of this group would be beaten with sticks and then cut into little pieces and those little pieces would be set on fire.
And then buried in different places.
Yeah, like, some of them have an easier time moving through the world than the other. It's
Yeah.
like a nice complexity to add to a book that is for, like I said, sad 16-year-old girls.
Yes. The next day, preparations continue for the anniversary. Seraphina is in charge of deciding the performance schedule and the list of performers. She keeps seeing this performer group of acrobats and she's like, I don't want to deal with them. She then goes to see Orma and is followed for a while by that guy who is like, you need to repent. But she's able to kind of escape him. At Orma's, he tells her that his father is plotting something and that the coin was a symbol and it was from his father's hoard. So we learn that dragons do hoard, but they are no longer allowed to hoard riches. And that was something that was decreed on the by the dragons. And Seraphina does kind of say like now they hoard knowledge.
Which is our 3rd or 4th book where
Yeah.
they use the concept that dragons hoard, but try to subvert it in Blue Moon Rising, which you still should read.
Don't read that book.
Don't read that book. And the dragon there hoarded butterflies, which is possibly one of the most interesting things about that book. And we see it in other books where like dragons will hoard knowledge.
Yeah, and even in the books where dragons hoard actual gold, like in Tooth and Claw, which also don't read that book, the way they talk about their wealth is interesting. And in His Majesty's Dragon, like how much the dragons like shiny things is like so cute and wonderful, even though they don't have cords.
The same way that books about vampires each have their own take maybe on like sunlight and how because some vampires can be in the sunlight. Some I think the horde is like a thing in dragon literature where like different books have their own take on it.
Yeah, so he says that he knows every piece, every coin, every cup, every piece of every object that was in his father's hoard. So he knows that this is a symbol that his father is about to make a move. And they have this really interesting conversation where he admits that he hates his father. And I have the quote here. Orma rolled his eyes towards me, the light flashing like a frightened animal's. Quite the contrary. I want to see the guard on him. I want to see him brought to trial. I want to see him hang. Not because he is truly, logically a danger to the Ardmajar, who's the leader of the dragons, because you're right, he might not be, but because in fact I hate him. And then it goes into Seraphina's perspective, and she says, absurdly, my first response was a knot of jealousy, like the fist to the stomach, that he not only felt something, but felt it intensely about someone who wasn't me. I reminded myself that it was hatred. I could not possibly prefer that to his benevolent indifference. So Orma admits to her that he's feeling this strong emotion, which again, dragons are not supposed to feel. They're supposed to actively guard themselves against it. And I really like that response from her where she is like, I hate that he feels this strong emotion about someone other than me, even though it is hatred.
It is 16-year-old girl. I also just realized now how helpful it was for Seraphina and everyone in this book that Orma's dad is like, by the way, I'm plotting something. Like it really makes it it's really helpful because we find out that he's been hiding after trying to be arrested by the dragon police for like 20 years now. So he's like been
Yeah.
in hiding and then he's like, "Oh, by the way, I'm back."
And Orma's convinced that he's in a human form somewhere in the capital, and he's like, he will be where we least expect him.
So like really it's so helpful that for the book that he like is like, by the way, come to get you.
Yeah. As they're having this conversation, the dragon who was attacked earlier, his name is Basend, arrives with a letter stating that Orma must teach him how to pass as human because he's doing such a poor job of it. And this is another area where you're like, okay, he's obviously a double agent, right? Like, there's no way he's not a double agent, and it takes them the whole book to figure this out.
He's literally working as a spy for the dragons when we first watch him get the shit kicked out of him. And then he's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, actually he's here because he's a nepo baby and now you have to watch him." And he's like, "That must be true."
Yeah. Seraphina goes to tell Lucian what her grandfather is plotting at Orma's urging, but stops to see what's called the Mega Harmonium, which is what the protege of Viridis is building. So Viridis's protege is named Lars, and it's just basically like a pipe organ, is kind of how it's described.
Yeah, they make it seem like a big thing, but it's just a pipe organ.
Yeah, it never really comes up again in this book, maybe in the next book. She meets Lars, who again invented it, and realizes that he is another one of her grotesques named Loud Lad. The two of them eat lunch together, and Lars tells her that he heard her singing in his head, and that's why he came. The Earl Yosef then appears and starts to verbally assault Lars. When he turns to leave on his horse like accidentally kicks Lars into the river.
This scene doesn't make any sense, like geographically.
It was weird.
He gets knocked off a bridge by a horse because he's standing on it, and like,
The horse like hip checks him into the river, I guess.
yeah, accidentally.
And though it's so cold because it's winter that she realizes Lars is gonna have to like people fish him out of the river.
Great scene. Like the whole community's like, ah, and like fishes him out.
Yeah, this must happen. I feel like this is a thing that happens a lot. And
So many horses knocking people off bridges. It's a problem.
yeah, she realizes that Lars is going to have to change immediately to avoid hypothermia. So she starts singing to distract the crowd because she's realizing that Lars probably has some dragonness about him. He's hiding under his clothes. But she is looking at Lars as he changes, but what she sees is only one small band of scales around his arm that's so small it looks like a piece of jewelry instead of scales. And she's really jealous in that moment, and she's like, oh, this must be what Lady Okra or Dame Okra felt.
She's jealous of him in a scene where she's singing so well that everyone is staring at her and cheering.
Everyone in like, "Yeah, Seraphina, you rock."
Yeah, she's like, "Oh, Lies has it so lucky," and everyone's like, "Seraphina," like, people are, like, throwing bras at her, you know, they're like, "This is my jam!"
Yeah. Lucian then appears and walks her to the palace, and they bond over books because they're both nerds. He tells her that he saw her sing at her father's second wedding. That was when he first saw her, and that he's like kind of been obsessed with her since. He's young too. He's the captain of the guard, but he's also like 16. So, how he is the captain of the guard, who knows?
He's, like, pretty so he's, like, very observant, and we
Mhm.
learned this by him being like, "Yeah, so I saw you singing, like, I don't know, at your father's second wedding," and I was like, "Oh, maybe she's a bastard like me, so I, like, investigated you," and she's like, "Oh, no, did he find out about the thing that I'm a half dragon?" He's like, "Oh, turns out you're not a bastard anyway," so you're like, "Oh, I guess he gets to be the servant of the guards because he's, like, a detective?"
Yeah, but he's still 16.
He's still sick. Yeah, he the nepotism hire of it really shows up later in the book, but it's just also, like, so weird that Seraphina's like, "Oh, I hope he doesn't figure anything out about me," and he's like, "By the way, I've been thinking about you for years." It's so weird.
Yeah, like it's so obvious that he's kind of smitten with her, and she's just like, He can't figure out my secret." Like she's realizing how observant she is, and she has a tick where when she gets nervous, she sticks her hand under the sleeve of her left arm, like her left arm sleeve, to touch the scales that are there. And she like almost goes to do it, but she's like, "Oh, I can't do that in front of him. He'll start to suspect that there's something under there." So she's like getting really paranoid as she's talking to him, even though he's just being like a nice guy.
Yeah, doesn't realize that he's, like, obsessed with her in, like, a romantic way, not in a dragon way.
He's, like, actively praising her. He's like, "You're so talented. How do you get to be so talented? You're just like, you don't even seem like you try. You're, like, just so, like, amazing." And then he asks her, he's like, "How did you get to be so" what does he say? It's, like, ridiculous. "What's it like to be so talented?" is what he asks her. And she's like, "I don't know. What's it like to be a bastard?" And he's like, "Okay." And then he runs away because he's upset. And it's like, "Girl, calm down." Later, Glyselda appears and tells her that a rogue dragon in dragon form was spotted in the countryside. And again, that's against the treaty rules. And this dragon was spotted by this group of exiled knights. And we learned that all of the knights that fought in the dragon wars were exiled and now live in like a cave in the country. She lies her way into questioning the knights. She's like, "Oh, I'm here. Like Lucian sent me here."
Just shows the guard and was like, "Let me in, please," and he's like, "Yes, madame.
He's like, "You're the court composer's assistant, so you must be credible."
I'm gonna let you question these captives."
Yeah, she like starts questioning them. They give her a description of the dragon, and she's like, "Cool, great." Lucian then arrives, and he is like, "Well, why don't we like work together? Because obviously you're just gonna try to go around me anyway, and it would be easier if we just work together." And like as she's leaving, he's like talking to the guards, and he's like, "Did she have my token?" And the guards are like, "No, Lucian." And he's like, "What did I say about letting people see my captive people, like people that I'm planning to interrogate when they don't have my token?" They're like, "We're not supposed to." And he's like, "Yeah. So like, why did you let her see these people without having my it's like okay,
This
it's
16-year-old is telling these 30-year-olds, like, these guards' password is password, like, that's the vibe they bring, you know?
yeah. They also bond over philosophy at this point. Like there are a few places in the book where she's like, "Have you heard of this philosopher? Or have you read this book?" And he's like, "I couldn't call myself a scholar if I hadn't read that book." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's the same kind of boy that I would have had a crush on when I was 16. I get it."
They get each other's references.
Later, she goes to a tavern in Quighole, which is where all the Quigs are like. They live in like basically a ghetto. Like they are forced to live in this area. Like the doors are locked at night, so they can't leave.
And they go specifically after they try to go to, like, a regular restaurant,
Yeah, with Orma and Basant.
but Basson gets kicked out because he sucks.
Well, also he's a
I
dragon.
mean, xenophobia, but, like, also.
Yeah, he's like not trying to be human at all, which like, in some ways is like this statement of like why is that the right way to exist? But
We can have a conversation on, like, masking and, like,
yeah,
being forced to fit into a society, but also
yeah.
Basson talks, so it's like he's in the wrong anytime he opens his mouth.
Yeah, and he's portrayed that way. And yeah, I think you're right. Like we can't have a conversation on masculine and also like Seraphina's own inherent hatred towards the dragony aspects of the dragons when they like are in their human form because she is like her commentary surrounding like the things that he's kind of making mistakes with like with the way he's holding his eyes and stuff is open revulsion and disgust. Like she's really disgusted when dragons aren't able to act human in the same way that she's very disgusted by her own scales. And like that's another like nuanced conversation that we could have, but Bassin is in the end a villain.
Anyway, so they end up at this quig hole, which seems like the coolest place.
Yeah, like it's where like a lot of scholars go, dragon and human, because there are things that they can learn here that they can't learn anywhere else. So there are humans and dragons together. There are also quigs in this tavern, and they're like melting a bottle to like weave this glass basket, which is super cool because they can like melt things with like by heating them up with their like tongues. Orma then distracts Bassin and pulls Seraphina aside. He hands her one of his earrings and tells her to contact him with it if it's an emergency, that he's altered it so that it only will contact him and not the dragon guard, which is illegal. And they both know it, but they realize that these are, extraordinary circumstances. The next day, the Ardmajar arrives, and the Ardmajar is the dragon leader. It's a weird name. Yeah, his name is Kaminat, so I might just call him Kaminat after this. Seraphina and the band play while he makes his speech, and then she drops into another memory. And this memory is of her mother, where she is arguing that emotion leads to art. And the other dragons are kind of appalled by this. They're really made nervous by this. And this is where we learn that dragons, in their human form, they can feel emotion for the first time. When they're in their dragon form, they cannot feel that emotion, but they can remember what it felt like. So they often will miss it. And it's something that a lot of dragons see as like an addiction. Like they get addicted to emotion, they view it as a disease. What they find is like a lot of dragons, once they are human, they don't really want to be dragons anymore because they really love having these feelings. And that's something that's scary to the dragons, which is part of why they try to control it so much.
We talk about art too. There's an interesting conversation about art that goes throughout this book. That emotions are like a necessary part of it, but it doesn't really go anywhere.
It kind of reminds me of like administrations who don't understand the value of art, who like try to seek to quantify it in a like economic sense. They often like undervalue art, and it's really hard to try to quantify something that is inherently not quantifiable. Its value to society is not necessarily tied to any kind of monetary gain, and shouldn't be. And this book is really obviously like making that statement as well. And the dragons just like don't understand that because they are so driven by logic and math that they can't accept that something doesn't fall into one of those categories. And that's not to say that like math and art don't exist together, because they absolutely do.
Just like a theme of this book is art, and there's a love of art, which I think is like
Yeah.
nice and wonderful.
Do like the way that she discusses art. Actually, there was like a Q&A in the back of my book that I read with the art, or with the artist, with the writer, and the way that she talks about art and the value of art is really quite nice. So she does have a really good understanding of the importance of art. Seraphina then wakes up in Lucian's arms and tells him to meet her at the dance that night so they can discuss how to move forward. That night, Lucian tells her that they are going to see the Banished Knights the next day. And he's like, "This was your idea." And she's like, "This was absolutely not my idea." And he's like, "Yeah, it was. We're going to go together." And she's like, "I don't want to go." And he's like, "No, yeah, you do. You do want to go." And she's also starting to realize in the scene that she has feelings for him, and she doesn't know how to feel about it, because the next scene we have this real scene of self-loathing where she really hates her skill. She's disgusted by them. She like doesn't know what to do about it, and it does feel really like when you're 14 and you don't love your body and you are really like self-conscious and insecure about it, which it was like, girl, it's okay.
It reminded me of when I was a 14-year-old girl, and like, the world is not kind to 14-year-old girls, and you just don't want to be
No.
a 14-year-old girl.
Yeah, yeah, it really did feel like that. In her garden, Fruitbat then appears and gives her a hug. The next day, she and Lucian leave to go see the knights. They pass the spot where Rufus was killed in the forest, and they decide that if he was killed by a dragon, the dragon must have moved his body there. There is a rookery nearby, and Seraphina investigates it, stating that scavengers like dragon dung heaps. Which the way that she like kind of approaches this is so accurate to the way that like she's kind of embarrassed about saying the word dung heap or like, referencing dragons pooping because she's a 16-year-old girl and like she doesn't want to say the word poop in front of this boy that she likes. It's just like very funny how she tries to like dance around it, and Lucian is completely oblivious to this the weirdness or her embarrassment of having to talk about this because he's like, yes, a clue. They go to this kind of like midden heap of this dragon, and they find Prince Rufus's horse's tack there. So they know that yes, Rufus was killed by a dragon. Lucian then tells Seraphina that he thinks she's in love with Orma. Do you want to say anything about that?
He's like, "You're in love with Orba," and she's like, "My uncle? I can't tell you he's my uncle because then you'd find out I'm half dragon and you would like beat me to death with sticks and cut me up into tiny pieces and then bury me and set those pieces on fire." But like, so it's like a weird scene.
It's like a really weird, and he kind of says it like, "Ooh, you're in love with Orma," in like a, and she's like, "I can't deny it, because then he'll know my secret."
Yeah.
But ew. They arrive at the Knights, and here we get a good description of the way that the Knights used to fight the dragons. And we learn that the way that they had to fight the dragons was really considered kind of this martial art. It was this really specialized version of fighting because dragons are so hard to kill. We learn that dragons are flammable, and their scales are actually what protects them from lighting on fire. So dragons breathe fire, and they develop the ability to breathe fire as a way of lighting other dragons on fire. So what they would do is they'd try to get a hole through the dragon's scales and then light that on fire, and then the dragons would basically internally combust. It's interesting to learn about that fighting style. We also learned that because they were exiled, this martial art, this skill, has kind of been lost, and it only exists in these older knights. It's not being passed down to anyone else. So this country is pretty vulnerable to a dragon attack for this reason.
I think it's just a really cool scene, and I think it does some really interesting world building and like thinking about how this dragon war would actually work logistically.
Mm-hmm.
I don't it's smart writing. It's a fun scene. The knights are like really fun, cantankerous kind of old men who like bicker back and forth. It's great.
Yeah, she, I think, asks them about her grandfather, whose name is Inlin, and they know who he is because they know all of the dragons by name because they had to really learn what they were like when they were fighting them, but they're not sure if that's the dragon that's in the countryside. They leave, they flirt with each other for a while on the way home, and then her grandfather actually does appear before them in dragon form. He threatens to kill them, which Seraphina can understand because she can understand dragon speech, but humans cannot understand dragon speech. So she's talking to him, she's bluffing, saying that she has a Quig device in her brain or in her like tooth that will explode if he tries to harm them. And he believes her and leaves, but then Lucian is really suspicious. He's like, how were you able to talk to him? Are you like a dragon in disguise? And he's like, you're not allowed to have a Quig device like that. And she's like, well, I don't actually. I was lying to him. And then they have this like really long hug, which is sweet. Orma and Basson then arrive in dragon form because Seraphina was able to contact Orma through her little earring. And Lucian is then like, you told me you didn't have a dragon device, and arrests them all. He's like, you're under arrest.
Yeah, it's very funny. He's like, "You saved my life. I almost died." And then she's like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Could it be?" And like immediately he's like, "Never mind. Your uncle, who I think you're in love with, just showed up, and now I'm mad again."
Yeah, and he like it's like even though Orma and Basson are both like huge dragons, he's like under arrest, and they're like, okay. Because again, it's illegal for them to be in dragon form. He's like, you need to change back into your human form immediately. And they're like, if we did that, we would be naked, and there is like 2 feet of snow on the ground, so we're not going to do that. And he's like, fine, but you have to walk ahead of us. So they get back to like this guard post in the kingdom, and they're being kind of sequestered there. Bassin and Orma then turn back into their human forms and are given clothes. Seraphina then says she needs to go to the bathroom, and she's taken like all the way across the castle to this like outhouse. She's not like allowed to use the bathrooms that are warm. She says like how long the walk is to this outer guard privy. And trigger warning here, this is where we do get that scene of self-harm. Do you want to describe this?
No, I mean, a real it's she looks at her scales, she wishes they weren't there. She uses the knife she has to like pick one off. It's grosser than that, but I'm not going to describe it too well.
Yeah, it's very much a reference to like cutting.
Yeah, it's literally like her wrist too.
Yeah.
It is very much a scene that like also I think emotionally very much carries is a very emotionally honest scene for how it feels to be a sad 16-year-old girl
Yeah.
who doesn't like her body.
Yeah, she thinks like maybe a scar would be better than the scales. It's very sad.
It is very sad.
It's very This scene is very delicately approached in a way that shows that the author really understands that emotional kind of, those complex emotions that go into self-harm. And you mentioned this earlier that the scene understands it without glorifying it. And I think that is a really smart way of describing this scene where we don't get the sense that she is right for doing this, but we don't get like a judgment about it. It feels very much like this is just something that some people go through and it's really hard to watch.
And I think they show it in a way to help a reader who is maybe a sad 16-year-old
Yeah.
girl, maybe in the car with you listening to this book. Like deal with that. So it's a great scene. I thought it was cute, which is a weird thing to say about a scene about self-harm, but I think it's an important scene handled well. And we talk a lot in this podcast about important things that are not handled well, so it was really
Yeah.
nice to see that.
Yeah, it was really handled well. After this scene, they are taken to talk to Kamanat, the leader of the dragons, and the queen. And basically, they all are dismissed. She's like, well, it's fine. Orma then tries to speak alone to Kamanat, but he keeps Seraphina with him because he wants to talk about the threat of his father. And Seraphina accidentally then reveals that she is his niece because she just assumed that the Commandant knew, but he didn't know because there was apparently a lie that his sister died in childbirth but didn't have a child. She died without a child. And the Ardmajar is then like, oh, you are emotionally corrupted because not only do you have this niece who you obviously care about, you lied to protect her, which means that your like loyalty is actually to her and not to the Ard. So he tells him that he must report for excision.
Mentioned it before, but there were other dragons that knew about
Yeah.
Seraphina that were like close to Orma, a specific lady dragon that may come up later.
Yeah, she's the leader of the guard, the dragon guard. Her name is Escar.
Yeah, she used to be a censor and then she left that, which is why she knew. But so like Seraphina thinks that everybody knows. And then
Yeah, she thinks all the higher up dragons just know.
so like whoops.
And she's so upset by this.
Well, yeah, they ordered basically her uncle to either be murdered or to have all memory of her and her mother stripped from him. You know, that's something to be upset about.
Yeah, I think it's a reasonable thing, but she's just like getting punched, sucker punched in the face like over and over again right now.
Yeah, she had 1 minute where she hugged her crush, and then everything has been going incredibly poorly since then.
Yeah. She has another memory that her mother left her of her mother leaving the dragons for the last time by toppling a cave over her father, which is a pretty cool scene. Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, the scene rules. We get a flashback, and Seraphina's mom is in a chase with her dad in like a snowy mountain. It also sort of
Like
seems
Glacier
glacier
Mountain.
mountain where like there's ice all around. And she has just found out that her father was talking over his hoard and like secrets told on a hoard need to be hoarded, which is like, that's a cool thought. And then
Yeah.
the dad is like chasing her down and he's like, don't tell the king we're all planning to kill her. Because like a bunch of he's a general, and then a bunch of the other generals were like, we should kill the king and then like kill all the humans because they want to break up the peace or overthrow. They don't necessarily say kill, but she's like, oh, my dad's a traitor. he traps her and she like pretends that she's gonna yield and he fights her a bunch and she's like, oh, I'm submitting. But like actually she's doing math in her brain because she's gonna drop a giant icicle on top of him from above.
Well, she destroys a pillar that causes the cave to collapse.
Yeah, but he's monologuing and she's like, all right, the air temperature is this. And if I want to shoot at this angle, I need to do this. And he always, I listened to this on the audiobook. It was a different voice and it was cool. And then so she like maths her way into defeating her father. And then she stands over the body and she's like, do I have to accept that I maybe killed my father? And I am like a person who has like murdered her dad. And then her dad's just like, at the bottom of the cave. And she's like, ah, okay, he's not dead. Never mind.
Yeah, she drops a bunch of Quig devices on him because she's like, the shininess will attract other dragons, so he's not gonna die.
Yeah, and then she, like, flips her hair back, you know? She doesn't have hair, she's a dragon.
She walks away. There's like an explosion happening behind her as she slow mo walks away. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 and she's like, "I'm never going back."
Yeah.
There's no explosion, we're being metaphoric, but still.
Yeah. Well, kind of an explosion because the thing collapses.
Yeah, the glacier collapses behind her.
I mean, she does shoot a fireball. Well,
It's a great scene.
yeah. The next day, Seraphina is really upset for obvious reasons. She goes to breakfast with her musicians and she learns that there's a rumor going around that she is a dragon. There's also this initiative that's been started where people have to prove that they're not a dragon by getting their fingers pricked so that they can see what color their blood is. And all of her musicians are kind of annoyed because they all had to get their fingers pricked. And
And they didn't like it, I guess, I don't know, they seem way more mad than they should be.
also, their fingers seem like way more banded. Like, I mean, we've all gotten our fingers pricked for like different blood tests and things at the doctor's, and it bleeds for like 1 second and then it's fine. And it sounds like their like fingers are all really bandaged, like a lot. It's like, do you guys have clotting issues? Which maybe they do, I don't know. But her one musician is like, no, she's not a dragon. And anyway, we can prove this right now by taking her. So he walks her over in the mess hall to where a group of the dragon guard is sitting. And he's like, hey, can you just smell her? Like, do you smell her? Can you smell that she's a dragon? And they both sniff her. And she's like, oh my God, they're going to find out because the one like sniffs directly on her wrist where her scales are. And then they both sit down and are like, no, she's not a dragon. And she knows that they would have been able to smell the dragon on her. And so she's having this moment where she's like, oh, their loyalties are not what I thought they were. She thought that their loyalty was to the crown because they are part of this dragon guard, but she's like, oh, like these dragons are going to protect other dragons and they're willing to lie to do it. So it's kind of interesting to see that like shift in her perspective surrounding dragons. But she's still really upset by this because she's like, everyone thinks I'm a dragon and I'm not even a full dragon. She goes to Viridis and Viridis is like, you should take the day off. And she's like, no, Viridis, I'm not a dragon. Like, I'll be fine. I can do the blood test. It's fine. And he's like, no, like I knew your mother. I know you're part dragon. And he basically tells her here, he's like, I will protect you if it comes to that. So lie low, let the rumors die. Like, we will protect you. We will keep you safe. I promise. And it's this really sweet moment where she realizes that Viridis really does have her best interests at heart. She's kind of excited that he knew her mother because then she has this new connection to her mother through him. He also just like offhand says like that he's gay in this scene. He's like, yeah, like if I was attracted to women, I might actually have like fallen in love with your mother, but I'm not. Which is like really great. We have our first like queer character who is not like a harmful.
First queer character! Pew, 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 pew!
Yeah, he's like a good representation of a queer character where he's queer and he's like frustrating, but it's not because he's queer.
He's here, he's queer, he's got gout, and he's upset about it.
And he's a good musician. So Seraphina like gets a note from Glyselda asking to meet with her in like this scene kind of confused me, asking her to meet in one of the lower laundry rooms in the palace. So she is walking down the palace and she's like, this is wrong, this is really low in the, like, why would Glyselda ever be in this part of the palace ever anyway, like let alone today. And when she is down there, Lady Karanji and Princess Dione, who is Glyselda's mother, corner her and threaten her and they like, you're a dragon, we're gonna prove it. And they like grab her and she extends her wrist. She's like, just prick my finger, it's fine, you'll know then that I'm not a dragon. And they really deeply cut her wrist.
She walks right into a trap, and then she's like, "Don't worry, I'm okay." They just slice her open.
Then they get like really angry at her because they're like, "We know you're a dragon. How are you hiding it? Like, how did you do that? How did you hide that your blood is not silver?" And they just don't believe that she could possibly not be a dragon. And so they're like kicking her when Dame Okra appears and is like, "Hey, you guys need to get out of here."
Confused me so much. I'm so sorry. First off, why is the queen like in the fucking
Yeah.
basement?
Or she's another princess, but yeah.
Oh, sorry. The queen's daughter. Why is the queen's daughter, who's a princess?
Who we haven't like heard anything about until this moment. Well, like for a second I was like, "Oh, she's the princess of another country, right?" Cuz like I completely forgot that she existed at all.
She only shows up really in the first chapter because she's sitting with everybody else at the funeral, and it was her brother that died, and she's Griselda's mom, so we kind of know about her, but she like is not in this book at all. And then she shows up in the fucking laundry room to like torment her daughter's music teacher. It's like, so I was like, I feel
Yeah.
like she should have minions for this. And then like an ambassador from another country shows up and she's like, knock it off. And they're like, okay. It's such a weird scene. It doesn't make any political sense.
Yeah. She takes Seraphina to Griselda, and Griselda is able to get the court surgeon to stitch her wrist. Griselda does give her a change of clothes and does glimpse her scales.
And then she's like, oh, do you have like a religious girdle on? And Seraphina's like, oh yeah, I
It's because the original saint was a heretic. Yeah, and apparently like a thing in this world that we didn't know existed until just now. So
yeah, it's weird that they like basically revealed her and then was like, actually, just kidding. There's this thing you didn't know about that I can lie about.
yeah, the next day she goes to find Orma, and before he leaves, because he's like, I'm not going to be excised. He like refuses to be excised because he doesn't want to lose the like memory of his sister. He doesn't want to lose the memory and like his emotions towards his sister and towards
He's
Seraphina. So
going
he's like,
into
I'm just going to
hiding.
leave. Yeah. And so she wants to see him before he leaves. While she's on her way there, there's this huge like parade, saints parade happening at this point. And she is able to find her in the crowd. Seraphina,
Isn't it a play?
I think it's just like it's like a partially like a play, like partially a
Got
procession.
it.
Because there are also like this is where she sees the acrobats and she realizes that Fruit Bat is one of the acrobats. So it must like also be kind of like a street performance thing. So like Bassend then like confronts Orma and he's like, I'm part of the censors and you need to like report for excision right away. Seraphina then distracts Bassend by like wailing really loudly, which he's like off put by her emotion, while Orma escapes. And then Basson chases her through a crowd. They run like he's chasing her for a while, and then she finally like runs into like accidentally a group of the Sons of Saint Ogdo, which again is that dragon hate group. And she's like, he's chasing me, this dragon is chasing me, and they start beating him up. And then she takes reference in the cathedral and she's like, well, at least I'm not the one who started the race riots because there were other race riots happening independently around the
Yeah,
city.
all of a sudden, it's like a mass mobilization where they start like blocking off parts of the festival and like holding territory to like fight someone.
Yeah.
It's like unclear. It's like a huge demonstration.
But it seems like there's a ton of violence though. Like there are people who are getting beat.
Yeah, but it's just very funny because she basically gets the shitty guy beat up by the xenophobic mob and then is like, well, probably would have happened
Yeah.
anyway. Sew him off.
Yeah, it's kind yeah, it's like, yikes, girl, like you could have potentially killed that guy
Yeah.
by like telling them that he was chasing you. Like he was, but like it just feels a little icky.
It's like I said, Bassin being a villain undermines the message to not be xenophobic because he just sucks so much that you're like, it's not terrible that like some xenophobia is happening to him right now.
Feel like it should have been more of a statement of like the moral grayness that she has surrounding her dragon heritage and her human heritage, but it isn't.
Nope.
She takes refuge in a cathedral while the riot goes on and spots Hamanot in a monk's, like he's disguised in a monk's robe, just happens to be at the same cathedral.
he like slipped his guard because he wanted to look around, and now there's a xenophobic mob outside beating up people, so he's hiding. It's just like a weird coincidence.
Yeah, she also sees that Earl of Yosef there speaking with like one of the priests or maybe another monk, a religious person. And she's like, "Huh, that's weird." But then she goes, "Oh, but oh yeah, cuz Yosef was also with that band of St. Ogdo that she passed. Like he was one of the people in that group." And she's like, "Oh shit, he like hates dragons," which she already knew.
Yeah, she thinks that he is so when they describe the grandfather, he's described as someone with blue hair and blonde eyes, blonde hair and blue eyes, and that is the exact description of this Earl character. And then this like
Yeah.
Earl character is seen plotting, and Seraphina thinks that he is her grandfather already. He was not around when her grandfather was flying around in dragon form. So this is just further being like, oh, it's so weird that this guy keeps showing up doing crimes.
Yeah, she thinks that like cuz he's so hateful of dragons that he leaves when dragons enter a room and she's like, "Oh, it's because they would be able to smell the dragon on him." And she also overheard a conversation between him and Lars where he's like, "Everyone knows what you are. I'm protecting you so that people don't find out what you are," to Lars. And Lars is like, "Wait until they find out what you are, Yosef." And so she thinks that like Lars might be Yosef's son, and Yosef is like the dragon father of Lars. So she thinks that there's like this conspiracy happening where her grandfather is posing in the court to try to undermine the government so that the dragons can more easily come in and like take control, which she is right about in the end, but not completely right about who the her father is. But anyway, so she goes to speak with Kamanat, and as she's like, "Hey, why are you here?" The guy who in the beginning of the novel was like, "You're sleeping with the Quig, you need to repent," stabs her in the back. But because he stabs her scales, she's unharmed. It actually like bends the knife. And then Kamanat actually cuts his head off. He like swings his sword and he cuts his head off. They are like kept in the bishop's quarters while they're waiting. Lucian appears and he's like, "Well, why would that guy want to kill you?" And so she shows him the Quig figurine that she still has in her purse. And he like is like, "Well, what does it do?" And she's like, "It doesn't do anything. It's a figurine." And he's like, they all do something. All the Quig gadgets do something." So he's like fiddling with it and it starts speaking and it's like saying like, "You're an imposter, shape changer into human, imposter, imposter." But it's saying this in the Quig language, which like humans can't understand. So Seraphina can understand it, and she's realizing that it's like a way to detect who is a human in Sar form. So she tells Lucian this. And this is where they are like then they discuss that the dragons are initiating a coup and are controlling the sons of Ogdo to make them do like basically the dirty work. Like they're going to be the ones that bring the treaty to a breaking point, and then they're going to be the ones that are tried for doing so. So like it kind of takes care of two problems at once for the dragons that want to overthrow this government. Seraphina and then Lucian are like, "We got to get the band together," and the band includes Glyselda, fruit bat, whose name is Abdo, and she just was realizing is here now, Lars, and Dame Okra, and it's just them, no one else. The night wears on while Lucian and Seraphina they dance, and while they're dancing, they lose sight of a few people, and eventually they're like, "Wait a minute, where's the queen? Where's Glyselda? And where is Princess Dion, who's Glyselda's mother?" They realize that they have lost track of all of them because they had been keeping track of Kamanat and Yosef, but they didn't think that they would need to keep track of the royalty.
It's so funny because Kamanat spends like, so long being like, stop trying to protect me. And they're like, we're gonna protect me. And they're like, we're still protecting you. And he's like, do you know like where your family is or any of the other
Yeah.
royals? And they're like,
Yeah.
"Ah!" It's like, babes.
Yeah. So then they kind of like rush to find them. They find that Princess Dion, who is Glyselda's mother, has actually been poisoned in Kamanat's chambers because they were actually sleeping together, she and Kamanat, and it was like an attempt to make it look like Kamanat had killed her. And then they rush to find Glyselda and the queen, and Dame Okra is the one that like is like, "Oh, I know where they are because I have that intuitive ability." And they are up in Lucian has like a tower, which is where his like room is. And they get to that room. They were like toasting.
The queen and the princess cheersing with Yosef,
Yes.
and they're like,
And
"No!"
Lady Karanji.
Yeah, they're like, "No!" And they, like, slap the wine out of their hands, and they're like, "It's poison!" And then the queen
Yeah.
is like, "Oh, I already, like, had some." And they're like, "No!"
Yeah, and here, like, one of I forget if it's Lucian or Seraphina, but they, like, point at Yosef and they're like, "You're the dragon!" That's why, because dragons don't drink, and he's like, "Well, I don't drink because this people like, certain saint followers don't drink," and he's like, "I don't drink because of this reason, not because I'm a dragon." And then Lucian sets off the Quig device, and it starts speaking at Lady Karanji, saying, like, "Imposter! You are an imposter!" And then Lady Karanji, like, full on, like, fireman carries Griselda, like, grabs her, carries her, runs from the room.
It's so funny. This starts a series of events that could have been avoided if the main characters weren't frozen in place while they were happening, which is very frustrating.
And so they chase after them.
They're like, "Oh, shoot, princess, we should have stopped that. Anyway, let's chase them."
Yeah, Seraphina sends, like, a mental message to Lars and Abdo, who's Fruit Bat, saying, like, "We have to get to them at the back gate." And they reach them as Imlan is transforming into a dragon. So we find that he was posing as Lady Karanji for years and years and years. And he's like shed all of his clothes and he's transforming into a dragon. And they just stand there and watch him transform, like dumbfounded.
Cool scene because they do talk about the limbs stretching until they become scaly and like his shoulder bulging and separating until like wings come. So it's like really cool because they talk about humans turning into dragons and it's really great that they show it on page. But it is like a full paragraph where the two main leads who are like supposed to be the heroes just stare as the villain takes his final form despite being at his absolute weakest. And it's like, guys, you just stared at him when he ran by 2 minutes ago. You gotta be quicker, you know? They're just so 16 in this exact moment.
The quote is, "For all my exposure to Sarantarai, I never before saw one transform from human to dragon. He unfolded himself, stretched, telescoped, unfurled some more. It seemed logical as it happened, all his human parts plausibly dragon. His shoulders separating into wings, his spine extending back into a tail, his face lengthening, his skin bursting out in scales. He managed the entire thing without letting go of Griselda. He finished with her clasped firmly in his front talons." And then it says, "If we had been smart, we would have charged him while he was transforming, but we stood rooted in the spot, too dumbfounded to think." So, she admits it, but yeah. He is like trying to kill them. Seraphina tries to bluff again. She's like, "Take me with you. I'm your daughter," and it doesn't work. But Lars and Fruit Bat appear. Lars distracts him with his, like, he has these war pipes, which just seem like louder bagpipes, while Fruit Bat jumps on his throat and, like, constricts it so that he can't breathe fire because his scales are still, like, it takes them like 10 minutes to harden after they transform into dragons. So he's like keeping them from shooting them with fire.
Yeah, fruit bat. So every like half breed gets a superpower, and I guess fruit bats is parkour.
Yeah, like he's like a flip wizard. He like he's like acrobatic.
He would have a killer TikTok, is what we're trying to say.
Oh, totally, yeah. They are able to grab Griselda away, but Imlan then takes off with Abdo on his back. So Abdo's like now in the air. Orma then appears, so dragon fight, and we get a dragon fight. Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, it rules. So
It does rule.
they could have like not really shown it on screen because Seraphina is not a dragon in a dragon fight, and it's from a first person perspective. So I really appreciate that her attention is like, I mean, it's on it because she loves her uncle. She's afraid he's gonna die, but it's like actually a really cool scene where you see them like claw at each other, and you see that Orma is hampered because he understands that Fruit Bat is attached to his father, who so we can't just like flame him to death. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, the dragon strategy is they try to like bite the other dragon's head off when they are fighting them or try to ignite them from the inside. And
Because dragons are flammable, which is like pretty cool. I think it's a great idea.
I love that. I think that's great. Yeah.
Breathe fire so they could, because they're flammable.
Yeah, it's so great. But Abdo is on Imlan's neck, so Orma can't bite his neck off, and he can't like light him on fire because then Abdo would be incinerated too. But it's also clear that Orma is trying to keep Imlan from fighting over the city, but even still, like even as he's trying to like be defensive about the buildings and stuff, they're kind of there's all this collateral damage within the city where they're knocking over bell towers, like they're being thrown into different buildings. The destruction of just two dragons fighting near the city is still immense. So we can see how frightening this is.
Like lands on his city block and levels it at one point.
Yeah, eventually Orma, he's on fire. He crashes into the river where he's put out, and she's like, "Oh my god, he might be dead." And Inlen is starting to fly away, but then the dragon guard appears in dragon form and like pretty much immediately dispatches Imlan. They bite off his head, they set him on fire, his body falls to the ground, and yeah, and this is where it destroys an entire city block just from falling to the earth, which is, kind of terrifying,
Yeah.
the destructive capabilities of these dragons. Fruitbat then mentally connects to Seraphina and tells her that he is safe on Orma's back, and she sees like the vision of Orma, and Orma like slowly lifts his head, and she's like, okay, Orma's alive too. And she then is like, okay, I need to full honesty time. And she explains that she is half dragon to Glyselda and Lucian. And then Lucian's like, no, that's not a thing. You're not half dragon.
She explains sorry, I hope I didn't zone out and miss this, but she like it tells her grandfather who she is like a stalling tactic.
Oh yeah, I didn't mention that.
Yeah, it's not super important, but she like tells them, and then Lucian and Griselda was like, "That was a great lie," and she was like, "Nah, I really am," and then
Yeah.
they're like,
Yeah, Lucian has a hard time with it. He's like, no, that's not possible. And she's like, your aunt was fucking Commandant. Like, you know that. And he's like, yeah, but like,
That was a weird thing that the princess who shows up in the basement to beat up her
yeah,
daughter's music teacher
because she hates
because she
dragons.
hates dragons.
Which, like, I feel like could be a statement regarding like the fetishization, how like fetishization is also like still a form of like racism and prejudice, but the book, it's not. I don't think that is actually what it is, but like I think you could like read that into it.
Queen's a flimsy character. I don't think we need to look into it
No.
too much.
It was just like it felt like a conflict. It felt like an inconsistency in her character that she was both these things, and she wasn't developed enough for it to work.
Still don't understand why she's doing her own dirty work. I just get some
Yeah,
minions. We're getting off topic. So Seraphina tells them that, and they're like, "Oh God."
Glyselda like takes it in stride. She's like, "Cool, you have powers. This is great. I have an extra like card in my deck now. You are like a great ally to have in what's going to become a conflict." So the next day, Glyselda takes charge because her mother is dead and the queen is ill. They meet with the ambassadors and with Commandant. Her father is also, Seraphina's father is also there because he's that lawyer. They discuss the coup that took place in the Dragon's Kingdom because that coup was successful and they were able to overthrow the supporters of Commandant, and they're now demanding that he be returned so that he face trial. Glyselda says that they will refuse, which will start a war, but she's like, hopefully this war will end in a stronger peace. And we have these 18 people that are human dragon hybrids that can help us, pointing to Seraphina. Seraphina then goes to Orma to check on him because he's been hospitalized, and he's in human form because he refused to be seen by any dragon physicians because he's like, they're gonna excise me or like whatever. So he's like, I'm gonna just be seen by human physicians. And he tells her that he's gonna leave, but like they have this really beautiful like moment where he talks about how Abdo like was dancing on his belly once he landed, and like the feeling of Abdo dancing on his belly being like this really wonderful expression of joy and relief that he was able to protect Seraphina's friend. And neither of them actually do say that they love each other in this scene, but the way that they talk about how they feel about each other is such a beautiful statement of love between the two of them. It's really a sweet scene. Do you want to say anything?
Just about them being cute together.
Yeah.
They're cute together. It's nice. Like, I mean, it's just like so. Seraphina spent a lot of this book being like, "I don't know if he loves me," and then he's like, "I do love you," and it's like,
Yeah, she
"Oh."
realizes how much he loves her in this moment and that he always has loved her. And she's able to recontextualize that event when she was 4 on the top of that tower as him, as an expression of his love for her, where she like had, believed that it wasn't until this point. And he does tell her, like, I'm still going to have to hide because they're still going to want to excise me. So it might be a while until we see each other again. But like, it's just very, very much a very much a sweet conversation. She then goes to see Lucian. He's in his tower. They talk about the future. They talk about how they can't be together because I don't think I mentioned this, but Lucian and Griselda are actually engaged to be married, even though they're really closely related cousins.
Yeah. He has to marry his cousin for some reason, even though they do not like each other.
Yeah, both of them, like, they like each other as cousins. Both of them are very ambivalent about the fact that they have to marry each other. They're like, yeah, we have to marry each other. It's political, whatever.
I have a theory that so Griselda has a female friend that she spends the whole time with, and I'm like, sure if that's a thing, but who knows?
Maybe. Also, Griselda is like actively pushing Seraphina and Lucian together. She was first like, how do you feel to be a bastard to Lucian and like really upset him. Griselda's the one that's like, you upset him. You should go apologize to him because he really wants to be your friend, but that hurt his feelings. And she's the one that actually tells Seraphina to go see Lucian now. And she's like, you really need to go see him. Like, it would be helpful. And Seraphina, the way she's reading is like, oh, Griselda's unaware of how much we like each other. But Griselda's very, very, very smart and she's tactically minded. She shows herself to be tactically minded multiple times in this book. And like you, the reader, are like, no, Griselda's aware and she also like wants them to be together. But they both don't know that. So
A contrivance why they can't be together at the end of the book and they have to get together at the end of the second book. So they hang out. Lucian kind of so like Lucian is really bothered by her lies and he like has this whole
oh yeah.
backstory about his religion. After he saw her, he like thought that she inspired him to never lie and then when he met her for real because remember, he's been obsessed with her for years and she doesn't think he likes her. Like it's so weird. It's cute, but it's like, come on, girl. So he's like, I thought you were the embodiment of truth. And like, I promised I would never lie. So when you were lying about, not being a half breed, I was really upset about it. But now I understand that maybe like half truths are okay. And then, you know, they make out.
He also kind of admits he's like, I kind of put this on you. Like I expected you because I saw you as this embodiment of truth. I really was expecting too much from you when I like got to know you. He realizes that like he was seeing her kind of as a symbol of his own growth and not as a human.
Like a very self aware 16-year-old boy. He gives her another book
Yeah, he gives her a book, which like
and she's so hot about it.
she's like, oh, a book. Yeah, they kiss for a while. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like a
And
while.
then he's like, sorry, lady, we can't kiss anymore. I gotta marry my cousin. And then the
And then he's like, anyway, I have a funeral to go to because he has to go to his aunt's funeral. And she lets him go, and she's still standing on the balcony of the top of this tower. And she like throws her shoes over the edge because in her memory, when she was hung over the side of that tower, her shoes fall off and she watches them hit the ground and she's really frightened. So this time she like, throws her shoes off and she climbs to the top and she like spreads her arms and she feels free and feels like she's reclaiming that fear of heights. And that's how the book ends.
good ending. Leaves you interested for the second book, I do have to say.
Yeah, it sets up things for the second book. It makes you really want to meet the other hybrids and see what their powers are because I did really find them quite endearing. Like Lars is so sweet, very open-hearted, very, so is Abdo. Abdo's like this little boy. He's like maybe 10.
Hmm. Yeah, you're worried about the one locked in the shed in her brain.
Yeah, and like Lady Okra or Dame Okra is really, really a great character too. I like her a
She's
lot.
over 100 years old, which
Yeah,
is
she's like
crazy.
123 years old or something.
Yeah.
Like she's very old because dragons live for a very long time. Humans don't live, humans live the normal amount humans live, but dragons can live for like hundreds of years, if not maybe 1,000. Because Orma says something about how this one dragon law, was enacted like 1,000 years ago, and he was like, but like that was, my father was still alive during that time. Like that's not that long ago in dragon years.
Do we want to talk about just the dragons as an overview? We've been talking about them a bunch, but you don't really see them much on page. You get
Yeah.
some dragon fights, which like, thank you.
Hmm.
Mama loves. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I love a good dragon fight. It's like a wizard fight. I love when a wizard fight happens in a book. I'm like, wizard fight, wizard fight. This is like dragon fight, dragon fight. Yeah.
It's great. It's perfect. Yeah, it's so I feel like this book really leans on you know what a dragon is, right? You know, it's got scales, it's got it like they don't really describe it. They talk a little bit about like their spikes on their back.
Yeah, they can like put their spikes up and down on their heads to kind of show their I'm being deferential or I'm being aggressive.
It's just interesting that when dragons transform into humans, it's on more than just like a shapeshifter level. Like they have different feelings and stuff.
Yeah, when Seraphina first describes who Orma is, she says that he's really sensitive to certain fabrics, certain sounds. He doesn't necessarily understand human emotion. I was like, oh no, is this going to be like a reference to autism? But it doesn't feel like that.
Like who's the shitty one that starts with a
Oh,
B?
Bassin. Oh, I didn't even say, like, in the end, Bassin is like watching this dragon fight happen between Orma and Imlin, and he's just watching, he's not helping anyone. And then he transforms, he's like, I'm still going to arrest and excise or whatever the word is, your uncle. And because he's like complete and he's like, I'm so done with being a human. And he like picks up the dress that Imlin was wearing when posing as Lady Karanji, puts it on and is like, ugh, doesn't even fit right, and then walks away like completely like not understanding that like this clothing is very gendered. Like he's just so, I feel like it's just so like it's trying to show like how disinterested he is in any kind of human culture, any kind of human idea of self or identity that he, but it's just like weird. Yeah.
It seems like he doesn't even blink properly, but like other dragons seem to be relatively normal in their job. Like the lady Orma has a crush on seems to be like just chilling.
Yeah. Yeah. There's this kind of weird, it feels like this. I don't think this is intentional from the author, but it kind of feels this way where the book is saying like humans are better. And like dragons, obviously, if they were like true to themselves, if they were being honest with themselves, would want to be human. And instead of like these two species just being very different and having different strengths and weaknesses, and dragons who are disinterested in human culture are shown as being inherently bad, which like is fine because it's dragons, but because there are some themes of like xenophobia and like we had this conversation of like, is it xenophobia or is it racism and like what word we should use? And we came to the conclusion that it's not really racism, but it definitely at parts feels like it's referencing racist ideology as well as just like prejudice and xenophobic ideology. And if that is the case, then it's kind of there are some like ethical dilemmas surrounding this idea that one is inherently better than the other and that the other has to then mask as one in order to be correct.
Take on it was that the book wants to say that both are equally valid, but the story doesn't always back that up.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of saying it. But actually, I wanted to go back to my original point around like Orma having like the issue with like texture clothing.
Mhm.
When in the back that questionnaire with the author, she talks about how she was trying to think of like if a dragon, when it's in its dragon form, has really tough scales that are, you know, Seraphina's scales are so strong that a knife directly to the back bends when it hits her. Then once they have really soft human skin, they would be really sensitive to texture and like to fabric materials because they've never had to deal with that kind of sensitivity before. And she like talks about how like Orma has a pair of glasses like that he wears because his dragon eyes are so much more powerful than human eyes that it's something that actually actively bothers him when he's in his human form. So he wears these glasses to try to like help with that, which is an interesting. So she really thought deeply about like how the human form would be in some ways like an like dragons find it like an enhancement of their experience as a dragon, and in some ways they find it really a detriment to their experience as a dragon, which I think is really interesting. I found that quite unique in the books we've read because this is the first one where it's a dragon shifter book.
And silver blood is
Mhm.
interesting. I think it just exists so you can like have a way of discerning
Yeah.
between them, but it's interesting that they don't transform all the
Yeah.
way. They don't talk about how they transform, like if it magic or like something physical or
I
whatever.
also wonder, like, do they age as they transform? They live for so long. Does Orma like look the same as he did when Seraphina was a child? Will he one day look like an old man, or even when he is an old dragon, will he still look like, it seems like he looks like a middle-aged human? Like, will he always look like that, or will he slowly age as his dragon form ages?
What's interesting is it's not like they can shapeshift into like any
Yeah.
person, they shapeshift into a
Yeah.
person. So they have a human
Yeah.
identity that is like
Yeah,
unique
that
to
is quite
them.
interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting take on shape-shifting dragons, which is a thing that we haven't really seen. I feel like there's like we've talked about the types of dragons that there are. There's the dragons that are basically gods, like you see in
Mhm.
Earthsea, where they can like speak the world into existence and they know more than anyone could ever possibly. And then you have like the really animal dragons of the Dragon Prince, and then you have the very people dragons that you see in various forms in like Tammermere.
Temeraire. Yeah, the dragon companion.
Yeah, there's like human
Mhm.
dragons, and then there's like human companion dragons, and then this is like
And then there are dragons that are in a human society, like in Tooth and Claw.
I it's fun how flexible dragons can be, that they can work in all of these different ways. And I'm sure we're gonna try to read some more shifter dragons.
So, dear listeners, if you have any suggestion for dragon shifter books that you were like, "Ooh, I want them to read this," please let us know in the comments. Leave us some comments, please.
Get in the comments.
Yeah. Do you have any other
No, I think like
I think we covered it.
I feel like wow, maybe the book always didn't have an accurate depiction of a world that they wanted to
Mhm.
show you. I thought the 16-year-olds felt very 16.
Yeah, like, the romance between the 2 felt very much like a 16-year-old romance where they're bonding over similar interests that they like. It's not so, like, a thing that's happening in a lot of YA right now is it's, like, kind of more adult, and, like, this is a conversation that's happening where there are these really, like, physical romance scenes that you would find more in a romance novel, and this book, they're bonding over their interests, they're hugging, and they have one kiss. It feels very much like the kind of relationship you would have when you're that young, where you're really the reason she really likes him isn't because she thinks he's hot. It's because he's a nerdy scholar like her, which is super cute.
Misunderstandings were like, reasonable misunderstandings, and they're both genuinely nice characters to follow. I
Yeah.
liked them. They're great.
Yeah, and they aren't like blowing things out of proportion. It's reasonable that Lucian was really hurt by her talent being like, "Ooh, what's it like to be a bastard?" And
Mhm.
it's reasonable that like he realizes I was really putting too much on you by thinking of you as this embodiment of truth. But like that is a very like 16-year-old thing to think of the girl I like is a goddess, and then realizing that she's not and being mad about it is yeah, that's like a kid thing, I think. Not great.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a really good book for a 12 to 16-year-old kid who is kind of, someone who's sensitive, someone who likes art.
And a perfectly okay book for like a 30-year-old or like a 50-year-old. Like if you read it, you'll enjoy it, but it's not for you. With that, do you want to talk about? You want to just talk about our next book? Because I think I don't have much to say.
Sure. So this has been Seraphina by Rachel Hartman.
What are we reading next? Because we didn't write it down.
We are reading. I don't know the guy's name. Hold on. Okay, I got it. We are reading The Summer Dragon by Todd Lockwood.
You want to talk about why we picked it? And it was partially because we wanted to read Nice Dragons Finish Last by Rachel Harrison. And I read all of my books on a Kobo, and it's an Amazon exclusive, so we couldn't read it. But I've actually been talking about this book basically since we started this podcast.
Oh, I actually don't know anything about it other than so the reason we put this on our book list is because it was actually written by the person who did all of the dragon illustrations for Dungeons and Dragons, for like the handbook and the manual and all of that. And he does a ton of dragon illustrations. He's an illustrator, that's what he does, but he's also a writer. And I was really interested to see what his perspective on dragons was as someone who really has this visual relationship with them and if that like how that translates into a book. So it might be terrible, we don't know. I think it's also young adult.
I've read like 4 pages and there's a bunch of illustrations in them that are really cool. So at the very least, it'll be pretty to look at.
Yeah, it will be. Not that that will translate well to an audio format, but yeah. So that's what we're reading next.
So you should read it too because the pictures aren't going to translate. So read it and then when you listen to the book, you can
Yeah.
be like, "Yeah, that was a good picture" when we talk about it.
Yeah, The Summer Dragon by Todd Lockwood. So that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a like, give us a follow, leave us a comment, leave us your thoughts on Seraphina. and hit the subscribe button.
All right, bye everybody.